moral grandstanding through the internet. This came up this morning's news, so released yesterday afternoon. An author, an Australian author, has written a book and released it to a number of beta readers, alpha readers, to get feedback and to make adjustments and everything else. And has since been brought up against child abuse charges based on the book that she's written. Okay, she issued a pre-release of the novel to 21 advanced readers in March before a complaint about its content was made in New South Wales Police. Okay. The book was about an 18-year-old woman who role-played as a child with an older man. Okay, role-play and stuff. You can kind of start to see where there's going to be problems. But she's taken the effort to make sure that the participants, active participants, are of legal age. She's fighting allegations she possessed, disseminated, or produced child abuse material. Her barrister questioned police suggestions the novel contained child abuse material at all, and a constable was tasked with reading the entire novel. He testified that it contained parts depicting offensive content with someone implied to be a child. Based on this description up here, it's not implied to be a child. They're implied to be of legal age, engaging in age-based roleplay. Which, well, whether or not you find that offensive. So the character was definitely kept at the appropriate age, but was then acted as a juvenile during roleplay. And that then raises the question of, like, where these lines on morality sit. And, yep, it is called Daddy Dom, little girl. It's one of many fantasies out there. And it's obviously one that people find abhorrent. Some people like it. But it's a question of, well, everybody engaged in it is of consenting age and is fully legal. But the idea that they're role-playing a juvenile role, I think is obviously where the court's going to make a decision as to whether that implies offensive content. Blah, blah, blah. The officer said a part where the fictional toy store worker was being spanked was an example of assault. He conceded any this is the police officer, the references to sexual engagement or touching took place where the main character was 18. Police received no formal training in classifying child abuse material in line with Commonwealth legislation. The author rejected claims the book contains it. She's taking the right steps of, look, if it's that problematic, then don't publish it any further. Only 21 people have received digital copies of the book and no physical copies have been posted, she said. The magistrate heard that police officers had not read the novel when they arrested her. Instead, they acted on a Crime Stoppers report by somebody who themselves had not read the book, or the entire book. Police had been unable to find any child abuse material other than that allegedly contained within the novel on digital content. See, it's an interesting thing. There is, what do they call it now? Romantasy. If you go and look at romantic fantasy or realistically women's literature, you look at the bookshelves of it in the bookstores. The content in some of those books is, if it was produced in a visual medium, would be banned, quite literally. Yet, for some reason, because it exists in the written word, it's permissible. And not just that, it's permissible for reading in public by people that don't read it out loud. Blech. But there's coverage by other people online of the issues surrounding the proliferation of this sort of literature. Now, there are, amongst, I guess, the more erotic end of the romance authors and literature spectrum, there are concerns about how things which imply consensual, non-consensual role play or non-consensual acts are covered. And even the implication that something is non-consensual or hasn't been, or is potentially unwelcome, can lead to a book being banned or not being sold on a particular service. There are plenty of erotica authors who, will have found that their books have been available or banned from time to time on different services for rather arbitrary reasons sometimes, because people have had a moral objection to the book. It's not a legal objection, it's a moral objection to what's contained, even if the content is completely legal. So the idea here of daddydom, well, I mean, I won't say it's the first time I've heard of it, but the question is, well, is it something that is illegal in Australia? Australia's got some very puritanical views on a permissible sexual content in written word and other media formats. And so I think this is going to be interesting because she's taken the effort to make sure that the participating individuals in the book are clearly identified as adults and consensual and everything else. So it removes those aspects of issues for why the book should be banned or no longer published. And then it comes down to the consensual role play. Is that enough to cross decency lines? It'll be interesting to see what comes out of it. But it's not the only thing where potential puritanical issues are at play, because apparently search engines will have to blur porn image results. Now, the major search engines already don't provide porn site results openly in their image searches or things like that. Safe search, I think that's what Google's is called, is usually turned on. And it does a pretty good job of ensuring those sort of results don't appear. You can be surprised sometimes what an innocuous search can turn up if you're searching for actresses who happen to share stage names with various adult content creators. That sort of information can be surprising, particularly if you're not expecting to see it and you weren't looking for it. So yeah, specific information, you'll be redirected to mental health support services, fair enough. Search engines will also be required to blur image results of pornography to protect children from accidental exposure, though users can still click through without restriction. Well, that seems similar to, I guess the system's already in place. And again, you go back to those conspiracy-minded content creators who are saying that big bad things are coming down the pipeline. They're not going to react kindly to this, even if it is, I guess, something that most people would accept as, okay, that seems reasonable. It's still a restriction. So, first tranche of age-restricted material codes for online services, blah, 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 is due to take effect from December 27th. Apply to major search engines and app stores, social media services, online pornography services, and generative AI services. About 1 in 3 young Australians is first exposed to pornography before the age of 13, with the content often encountered unintentionally. It's like people forget what life was like before the internet. Now, nudity was something people saw before the age of 13. Was it in a sexual context? Probably not. Well, I mean, it was probably harder to encounter that back then, but it wasn't impossible. But compared to now, yeah, certainly the degree of sexualized content can be found a lot easier, and it is easy to stumble across, like I said, stumble across things you weren't intending to see. But that comes down to understanding what the internet is, which is an open place, source of information. And sometimes that information is not stuff that you were intending to find or see or engage with. It's called the internet. That's how the internet is. Can't pretend to make it otherwise. Survey of more than 1,000 Australians aged 16 to 18 found these encounters online were frequent, accidental, unavoidable, and unwelcome. Described by some teens as disturbing and in your face. 16 to 18. Frequent encounters. Yes, I can understand that. Accidental, unavoidable, and unwelcome. I guess if your parents are looking. Age inappropriate content at a young age. Again, people are forgetting what life was like before the internet and what people saw and did. If anything, I mean, I think the statistics are showing that the younger generations are sort of trending more puritanical. That the incidence of underage sex and pregnancy and all those other bits and pieces is actually falling. So if anything, the opposite seems to be true, but we're implying causation instead of correlation. So, yes, okay. So she gives the example of aggressively finding a child seeing a video showing a man aggressively choking a woman during sex through a normal search engine. Okay. I challenge anyone to find something like that through like a Google search or a Bing search or even a Yandex search or a Brave search. That sort of stuff just wouldn't... well, I've not tried every option to try and find it, but that sort of stuff just doesn't show up as a regular search. You've got to be intentionally searching out stuff like that. But, true, someone underage encountering that can't necessarily understand the context or unsee that content. Well, it also comes down to what Australia permits to be seen. Requirement search engines to blur images, much the way that Safe Search already works. Yeah, okay. Automatic redirects to mental health support services. Okay, I agree with that. I mean, that seems fairly reasonable. But if people still are doing research, like academic type research into prevalence of those sort of issues, or having to do research on it, should still be able to access that sort of information. There is important societal innovations, greater protections. Yeah, I mean, there are, redirected to professionals who can help support them. Okay, here we go. Here's the moralistic grandstanding. If it changes, if saves even one Australian life, it's worth the inconvenience to everybody else. Yeah, okay. And this is one of the issues that the conspiracists are looking at. That Australians does not mean that Australians will be required to hold an account to search the internet. Well, I mean, most people are using Google signed in anyway, so Google knows who you are. Reports of this occurring might make for good clickbait are simply untrue. Well, a lot of what she's been doing makes for good clickbait and is true. Common sense and reasonable and proportionate. Okay, well, some of them are. might wonder why they're not already in place. Well, it seems, as I said, it's like it's enforcing something that's analogous to what's already in place on some of the major search providers. So it's there already. Blah, blah, codes are separate and no other details.